And for me, the reason that ninjas really stuck out to me was when I really actually realized what a ninja was. A ninja is actually a story of like rebellion and empowerment. The original ninjas were all farm workers, and the original ninja weapons were all farming tools. I started learning more skill sets besides just like martial arts stuff. As I kind of like rose through all those skill sets, when I eventually ran into circus arts and fire performance and flow arts, I realized I can actually be a ninja. You know, it became an identifier for me, and I started leaning into it more. Any real disciplined martial artist will tell you the number one thing that you're trying to achieve is mastery over yourself and not other people. So I think there's just so much that goes into being a ninja that, like, you know, as a kid, maybe it started off like me in the garage swinging a broomstick, you know, like the Star Wars kid, but ended up being like a more profound way of how I live my life.
Hello, you beautiful people. I have some announcements to make. I have noticed that a lot of you are not yet subscribed to this channel. I would love for you to subscribe to this channel, because once I reach 1,000 subscribers, that allows me to unlock YouTube's community features, giving me access to things like polls and surveys, and then I can ask you guys what you would love to see and the things that matter to you on this channel. In other news, I would also like it if you guys could comment on these videos. Now, I know, it's like walking into a store and there's 7 employees and one of you, and you feel like all eyes are on you or your comment in this example. I promise that's not the case, because if more people comment, you get to blend into the sea of comments. And that's better for you, and that's better for me, and that's much better for the algorithm. Without further ado, I would love to introduce Xander Paris. Xander Paris, you are a professional ninja. You've been an instructor at countless flow arts festivals, and you ran a circus in Thailand. Not only that, you are a fire spinner. You have a pretty extensive martial arts background, and you create amazing pieces of leatherwork for your company, Meta Aesthetic Designs. I am so happy to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm always happy to share some stories and also just hang out with a friend.
It's always a great time. So I'm curious, can you share a little bit about your background and your journey from wanting to be a ninja since you've been a child all the way up to being a professional ninja in real life?
Yeah, so just starting with the fascination of ninjas in general, you know, part of it's just being a little kid, and we all kind of like latched onto something. Some kids are like, I want to be a cowboy, I want to be a ninja, I want to be a soldier, whatever, you know? And for me, I think the reason that like ninjas really stuck out to me was when I really actually realized what a ninja was. And, you know, a ninja is not just a warrior with like shadow flavor, you know? A ninja is actually a story of like rebellion and empowerment, you know? Like the original ninjas were all farm workers, and the original ninja weapons were all farming tools, you know? And the ruling class had outlawed swords, you know, forged metal blades for people, and that's how they kind of kept their power. And so something really resonated with me about, like, you know, yes, they're really cool warriors, martial arts, all that stuff, but something about like the ability to come from like such humble beginnings and even like be in a place of oppression, and to be able to use what you have around you and your skills and your body and all of a sudden come from nothing to something. Because, like, you know, in the social zeitgeist, like, ninjas are prolific. You know, we all know ninjas, and so many of us, like, you know, idolize like ninjas in that way. And I feel like a lot of it's just because of their cool badass imagery, but you know, that may have been what hooked me in at first, but really the way I started identifying with it was because of that. Kind of like the fundamental difference when you think of like a soldier versus a warrior. You know, a soldier is a fighter who does something because they're given orders, because they're paid to do it, you know? And a warrior is somebody who fights for causes that they believe in, for people that they care about. And, you know, the warrior philosophy of, you know, fighting for people is, and yourself, is always something that resonated really deeply with me. And part of that, I think, was just kind of how I was raised. You know, I had a mother who was all about like empowerment, and, you know, my father, while he definitely enabled me by teaching me a lot of things physically, because he, like you had said in your intro, like taught me a lot of like martial arts and stuff, he was also, you know, to be frank, just quite abusive. And So, that narrative of like resistance and rebellion and then using those skill sets like really stuck with me. And as I grew up, I started learning more skill sets besides just like martial arts stuff. I did dance for a few years. I did theater for a really long time. I used to do like speech and debate tournaments and stuff like that. And like, as I kind of like rose through all those skill sets, when I eventually ran into circus arts and fire performance and flow arts, I realized, oh my God, like I can apply like my theatrical presentation, my martial arts skill, my dancing footwork and abilities into this one art form all at once. And then I get to like combine that with like my passions, my personal, I guess, vision of myself and be a ninja. And so like, as soon as that fire was lit and I understood that that was an actual attainable goal as an adult to like, I can actually be a ninja, it became an identifier for me and I started leaning into it more. And I'm really grateful for the time I had teaching martial arts, for the time I had studying theater, studying dance, and even like things like speech and debate, because that amount of communication is what allowed me to learn and what allows me to teach. Because like you had said a bit when we were talking earlier, I've done a lot of teaching and instructing at festivals, being the artistic director at a circus, things like that. Like one of the biggest things I get from being a ninja is by growing the clan, and part of growing the clan is teaching the skills. And what I try to do is impart upon the community that we're growing is not just the skill sets, but the philosophy that comes with those skill sets. The philosophy that, is often taught throughout like what we see in warrior culture throughout the world, of self-discipline, of and this is one of my favorites, is just that like violence is, it might be an option, but it's the last one. And any real disciplined martial artist will tell you that like the number one thing that you're trying to achieve is mastery over yourself and not other people, And so I think there's just so much that goes into, being a ninja that like, as a kid, maybe it started off like me in the garage swinging a broomstick, like the Star Wars kid, but ended up being like a more profound way of how I live my life and how I see myself and how I interact with people and kind of like bring them into like that culture to make them feel empowered too.
You touched on so many amazing things. I'm trying to figure out where to go from here. So I have a couple of things I want to address. I really love how you know the background of ninjas. Most people, like you said, it's just an aesthetic. It's people running around in black clothes, swinging a sword, shurikens and kunai and all the other stuff. But like you also said, people don't realize kunai is a farming tool. That's what its original purpose was. So tying that in the act of rebellion, I find that fascinating. From what I know of you and our interactions, it's very in line with your character and your persona and how you carry yourself. That's fantastic. The other aspect to that is how you carry yourself. So for me, I did martial arts. I did Taekwondo as a kid. Back in college, I did Krav Maga for about a year and a half, 2 years. And I think it fundamentally changed me in the sense that I have a self-confidence. I know how to carry myself. If push comes to shove, I know how to protect myself if I'm in a, situation that I probably shouldn't have been in. But like also you said, violence is an absolute last resort. The first option is run or don't even be in the situation to start, then protect your loved ones. And then at that point, you have to address the confrontation, but you have the skill set. So I guess my question for you is like, from your martial arts background and your training and all that other stuff, how do you carry yourself in person? How has that affected your self-confidence and your, the way you move through life?
It's kind of like you had said about your experiences. It does give you a certain amount of self-confidence knowing that, essentially you've got your own back, I think that's a big part of like, not just in a physical sense, like in talking about like, being able to protect yourself, but also in like the psychological sense of independence and knowing that you can trust yourself to do the things that you want to do. And we learn these things through martial arts. We can really learn them through anything. And honestly, the thing that I learned it from was Dragon Ball Z. I would watch Goku train, and literally, like, when you know something and like as a fact, but you don't like know it through experience yet.
Yes.
And when you know through experience, it shatters a ceiling in your mind, and now you just like have this enlightened perception of the concept. Watching like Goku train and then like be a Super Saiyan and like beat Frieza, and I was just like, whoa, homeboy went through so much and he did it. Like that really taught me the lesson of like what empowerment looks like in yourself, and like one thing that I share whenever I'm teaching anything martially related, because I always make sure to kind of like talk about the history of like these martial arts and stuff, but also just talk about the concepts of things like violence and like what we're learning and how it can be applied. And why I like the application of these like martial things on stage and as a performative act, because I feel like it's a really healthy outlet for a lot of those things that kind of come from our like testosterone or adrenaline, or like we need these things. Like we're kind of programmed in a way to be competitive because life in itself is this game of resource management, making sure you have yourself. So the confidence of knowing that you have your own back, both physically and psychologically, then allows you to spread your umbrella of awareness to other people, and like I had said earlier, warriors fight for themselves and their ideals, but they also fight for their loved ones. One of the things I always impart upon people with that concept of fight is, every society is doomed to fail if the warriors are in charge. Every single society that has ever used that mentality, every person who has ever thought they were better than because they had themselves, ultimately fails. And the reasoning I have for that is that the highest ideal is peace, and the highest arbiters of that peace are people who are pacifists. And so when I get into conversations with people like that, and they talk to me about like, because I, in some people's eyes, without them knowing me in a superficial way, represent, violence or like the ability to do violence. And I always just like to say, like, I exist so that I can create a safe space mentally, socially, physically for people who don't need to be who I am. And my ultimate goal is that people who are like I am don't need to exist at all, because kind of how I touched on why I like ninjas is like, that's rebellion. They had to rebel against something. And the reason it resonated with me was because I was a victim of abuse as a child. I wanted to rebel. I wanted to feel empowered. And in the ideal world, like, we don't have that any longer, And so when you ask about how like it helps me carry myself, it's definitely does help me feel confident in that independence. But it also is something that I try to remind myself to like stay humble and to help other people realize the balance between that self-assured confidence and the difference between that and ego.
I think that's huge. I know it's almost become a joke in the West, but like, you look at those like Chinese fighting kung fu action movies, and there's always the wise man on the mountain. He's like, you have to let go of your ego. You have to find inner peace. You have to find balance. So much that it became a trope, but there's so much truth to that I feel like it's often overlooked. I find that fascinating. Also, I wonder if you've had this experience, at least for me, like learning martial arts, the short-term feedback loop is immediate. If you lower your guard, you get hit in the face. If you put your guard too high, you get kicked in the ribs. But on a longer scale, like you said, with the shonen training arcs for like Dragon Ball Z, like you work towards something. You put the time and effort in. It takes a long time, but eventually you will cross that, barrier that you've been trying to push through, and you get to somewhere new. So both the short-term and the long-term things are incredibly rewarding, and it has different feedback mechanisms that appeal to different people.
Yeah. And, and that also applies to like flow arts, which is one of the reasons I love that. I love teaching because like, I feel like for most things that you do in life, there's like this time versus reward arc that slowly plateaus the higher you get, and everything takes just significantly more effort to like just make a little more progress. And people joke that like people that do and people that can't do teach, and like I think that's totally shit. I think that's people who are ready to help other people in their doing teach, and the best teachers are people who have done, and so there's this, people talk about teaching being rewarding. That feeling you get when you get the application of the thing you've been training for, when like it works, like you get that when you teach. Like when somebody can't learn a move and you just like use a visual metaphor to try to get them through it, or maybe they're being hard on themselves and like, oh, I can't do it, I'm just not coordinated, and you give them a little anecdotal story about like, I see a lot of people who are uncoordinated, I'm uncoordinated, this is to build coordination, and you help them with their confidence, like whatever it is, when they cross over that threshold into learning, like, and they break that ceiling, like you get to ride that high with them, like it's the best way to get a dopamine fix in the most wholesome way possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to the teaching point, like everyone learns in different ways. Some people you need an anecdote and a story. Another person, like you have to physically instruct them through the motions. Other people you need to relate concepts. It's fascinating how it takes different things for different people to learn in different ways.
Yeah, so one thing I love to do, I like to just zoom out and then zoom out on that zoom out and just get as meta as possible. It's one of my companies called Metaesthetic. And so I love to teach teaching because I've just done it long enough that like you're saying, I've tried to like figure out all these different ways to break through to different people and how they learn. And I came up with this concept that if you've ever seen the Powerpuff Girls, they've got this villain called Mojo Jojo. And Mojo Jojo says everything 3 times in 3 different ways. He'll be like, that is a red car. That car over there is red. There's a red thing over there and it is a car.
Yeah.
And, while teaching, I'll do that exact thing, and not only tackle it verbally that way, but then also tackle it like you're saying, maybe like physically instruct them if they're comfortable with that through the motion, or give them a visual example, or just break it down analytically, or give them a visual metaphor. Like 2-beat weaves, when I teach little kids, like 2-beat weaves aren't just like as organic as you think to everybody. And then the second I gave a kid like a poi and I said, pretend it's a sword and you're hacking and then slashing zombies in front of you, all of a sudden they go, whoop, 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 whoop. And I'm like, there you go.
I actually never put that together. So Powerpuff Kids, children's show. But the Mojo Jojo thing, 3 different ways of presenting the exact same information. I never picked up on that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so that's literally like a metaphor I used to connect the teaching concept to people. So it's like, it's meta in that way. I'm using the teaching style to teach the teaching style.
I love it. So how did you get into teaching? What made you want to pursue that area?
So I think like ever since I was a little kid, I realized that like, when you play like a RPG or like D&D or something, and you get to like put your skill points in different places, and some of them are a little bit more specific and others are more broad. I feel like I kind of realized that this same skill set of like critical thinking and just like kind of like, I guess, logic. I think this comes from my mom teaching me chess when I was like 4. Kind of applies to everything blanketly. So I kind of min-maxed my own brain in a weird way as a child. I was just like, I'm going to learn how to think and learn.
Yeah.
And like by doing that, every other skill I've ever learned, I kind of just create this framework that it exists in, and compared to the other frameworks of things I already know how they work. And like, there's so much overlap in everything in the world, right? And then because of that, I usually was able to teach myself things really well and then learn things pretty easily. One thing I do struggle with though is I'm actually really bad at being a student in a large capacity classroom.
Same.
I'm good like as an apprentice. I'm good in small groups. I'm good teaching myself. But yeah, so struggling with that, I realized that I think I understood the concept of learning well enough because I struggled with it going through school and stuff like this, and had to learn how to do it with myself. I learned it well enough to think that I could teach other people. And so it kind of just became natural because I just like to share information, like you always have the kid that asks why, right? And I was definitely that kid. but I was also the know-it-all kid that was like, actually, like, and a bit of both. And I'm not going to lie, when I was a little kid, there was definitely a lot of ego attached to wanting to be right. Yeah. And the gaining information and things like that. And as an adult, that transfers as you grow older and more humble and you have more experiences. And then you realize it's like, it's not about being right. It's about finding out what is right together, And so I think like that mindset and the ability and skills I'd picked up along the way, essentially to compensate for my own bad student abilities, translated into me having like a unique perspective that a lot of people like to pick up on. And, I tell people all the time, like when I do private lessons, they're asking, oh, how much is it? And all these things. Like I give them a range, depending on what they can afford and stuff like that. And then I tell them like, but if you don't want to take private lessons from me, you know how you learn something? And they're like, what? And I was like, you just hang out and you ask. I can't help myself. Like, you ask me how something's going to work. I'm going to show you how it works if I know.
I think, or at least what I've found, is the flow arts community is some of the kindest people and most generous with their information. Like you said, I discovered flow arts in, I think, December of 21. I had a martial arts background. I've never spun anything on fire. I literally just walked up to someone who was spinning on fire, like, hey, how do you do that? I want to do that. Like, oh my God, that's amazing. Let me show you. And then it just went from there. And then everyone started coming over like, hey, have you tried this prop? Oh boy, I've never tried that. Here you go. Oh, a sword. Fantastic. Here you go. And just everyone was shoving things my way. It was amazing.
And everybody wants to enable and empower you. Like, and yeah, like you're saying, like there's other communities where it's almost like, I recently had this weird thought that I realized like why grandmas have secret recipes. And I realized it was because that they used that as a crutch to know that their children and grandchildren will come to them for that secret cookie that they can't get at home. And it ensures them love, and like it's an insurance policy for attention from your loved ones. And I thought like, it's weird how such weird kind of like toxic really like things get turned into these odd, wholesome things.
Yeah.
Because like a lot of generations previous to ours have not done as much of that work to like be self-aware of these kinds of concepts. And I think that, a community full of people doing props, right? Or flow arts or circus arts, martial arts, right? Like there's a couple of different factors that key into that. There comes discipline, right? There comes interest and self-reflection. Because if you're learning something, you need to know what you did wrong. And a lot of us, we learned most of what we know, not all of it, but most of it was training alone in our home, training in the park by ourselves, and then we like share information together when we get together. But like, all that training happens on your own, which requires a certain amount of self-awareness, and so I think that self-awareness translates really well into our community values. And that's why you get people who want to share and people who want to like be healthy and friendly and all these things. Because it's not just a subconscious, oh, everyone in the flow community is nice. I think that we're kind of growing a culture out of the combined growth as all of us as individuals. And it's really cool to see.
Yeah, first thing, I've never put that grandma's secret recipe thing in. That thing that you pointed out, it never really clicked for me that it's a selfish intent as an insurance policy. I'm going to be thinking about that right before I go to sleep. That is fascinating.
That's what I thought about it. I was laying in bed and I was just like, why do people have secret recipes? Like I just didn't and then I like kind of went into it, like, why would you have one? And the only motivation I could think of besides like a monetary one,
right?
But grandma's not making money off her cookies.
No. To maintain,
like, what's currency for grandma?
Yeah,
it's just love.
It's love and attention. Head of the matriarchy. Fascinating. I'm definitely going to stay awake at night for that. The other thing for the flow arts community, I guess anything where there is learning and skills. I guess you can apply it to athletics or martial arts or flow arts. But you're right. It takes that level of introspection to try something. A lot of times, fail most of them. Understand what was done wrong, have the mental discipline to keep making that correction over and over and tweaking things to eventually progress forward. Yeah.
And I think there is one other core part that a lot of things have, but the flow arts is actually missing, which is good, is competition.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Like flow arts has zero sense of competition. There's no reason to put anyone else on a pedestal above anyone else other than to show respect for what they did, but it doesn't translate into a social currency the way that, if you won the X Games, holy shit, you're Tony Hawk. Like, and here's the thing. One thing I love about Tony Hawk is he seems like the most humble, nice guy, you know? But like, when you have any sort of skill set, right? Like the second you have competition, the second you have an artificial rating and structure system for who's better, and especially with art, it's hard to determine who is better at art.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we haven't had any real formalized type of competition in the flow art scene, I think, is why it's been able to grow so rapidly and keep that culture. I think that culture may have changed a bit the second that there was competition,
I never really thought about that. You're right. There is no really competition in the flow art scene because for martial artists, there's, tournaments. There's someone who ends up on top. Hell, even for musicians, potentially, like there's album sales. That's in the art space. But for flow arts, there really isn't anything like that. There's nothing for people to compete about. So like you said, there's no value structure associated with it. There's no people going head to head. There's no putting someone down or raising someone up. That's interesting. I never thought of that.
Yeah. The closest that there is competing for performances. Like, like there's only so many, whatever. But like, to be completely fair, like, there's 3 levels of performer, right? There's like, I do local events, small things, stuff like that, which there's not really competition for. So no one's like button heads, right? There's that medium level where there's like trying to like perform on stage for like big names at music festivals and stuff like that. But even then, that's less of that's more of a lifestyle and like getting free tickets, doing stuff, and way less of like, that's actually my primary source of income,
right?
And then there's like the high level performance, like Cirque du Soleil and things like that. But the amount of dedicated individuals to get to a skill level that is that high, remember earlier we were talking about like, it's narrower and narrower and narrower. And so that is the vast minority of the people in our community. And the people who are in that part know that they got there in part from everyone else along the way that shared that information with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so like they're in a position of privilege, but most of the people I've met in that sort of position, like, give back to the community. Like there's not very many people who are like, oh, this is my signature concept, like I have to keep it secret. Unlike something like the magic community, right, where you're doing magic tricks, you can't tell somebody how you do a magic trick because now you know my shtick and I lose all my credibility as a magician. Every magician dreams of the magic trick that other magicians don't know how it works.
Yes.
And so there's no incentive for that in our world. In our world, the incentive is to bring more people into the fold, to make our culture and our art form more well known, because a rising tide raises all ships. So like if more people did flow arts, then more people would want flow arts in places. The more people want flow arts in places, the more gigs there are for people who do flow arts,
Yeah.
And so we've got this beautiful like equation that worked out just right to like have our community be the way that it is. And that's one of the reasons I try so hard to teach the values of our community and philosophy and things like this when I'm teaching actual moves.
Yeah.
When I'm teaching workshops like that. I think it's a very important component.
I think it's huge. And you even take that a step further. I know that people compete for spots for performing in a certain showcase, but then the very next year, those same people are rotated out so other people can come in. It's less of a competition and more of like this group of people are featured. And then if they have done that before, then they pull from a different group. So everyone gets a turn. Everyone gets to shoot their shot.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of the showcases at like flow festivals and stuff like that, they're less look at all of these professional performers, and it's more of a showcase of look at our community.
Yeah,
it feels almost like the talent show that you would have at an extended family reunion with a giant freaking family. And that's why the sentiment at those festivals is, oh, it feels like a family reunion summer camp thing, and those exhibitions of people in the community feel really awesome because like there's not a single performer who goes on stage who everybody's not cheering for, regardless of like how well their performance is like taken. Nobody is there like breaking it down analytically to tear someone apart. Everyone there is just trying to find every reason to appreciate the person who's on stage.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about culture. We've talked a lot about, showcases and flow arts. You just came back from Fire Drums. How was it?
Fire Drums was fantastic. I had such a good time there. One thing I love, like Fire Drums is definitely like my home festival. And I've done a lot to try and invest in Fire Drums as well as because of how much Fire Drums is essentially like impacted and essentially invested in me, and so while I was there, I hosted rope dart battles there, which is sponsored by Rope Dart Academy. And they like Fire Drums has become the home for what we call like the tournament for the Golden Dart, and so we're building like this lore about like, the wearer of the Golden Dart protects the Golden Dart like through the years. It's like a WWE belt, but it's like a golden rope dart.
Okay.
And so people like show up to the workshops to take the classes to learn, and then we have a whole workshop slot of games, and then the finals of the games happen in the prop games on the last day. And so this year, Calum, the winner, the champion of last year's and actually this year's, one of the things that he did was he came and he taught and got accepted as a teacher the games themselves.
Ooh,
so
okay.
I took a backseat role in that and hosted the games themselves, and the games played them. But he taught the instruction class on how the games work, tactics, all these things, because he won. He proved he knows how it works. He proved he knows the tactics and all this stuff. And so, that part, which was just one section of my Fire Drums, just felt like so enriching and rewarding, because we created a game. The concept of the game is something that rang true with every rope dartist, because the thing about a rope dart, it's like handing a kid a Nerf gun and saying like, don't shoot it at anyone.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Rope darts are like, I want to do the thing. I learned how to do an elbow shot. Now I want to be a ninja at elbow shot someone.
Yeah.
So we created a game for that. And so, the fact that it did so well because it's being supported by the community, people within the community are working now on like spreading it to their other places, teaching it, things like that. And then Fire Drums wants to be a home for that game and that concept. And then we also get the support from like Frank and Sarah and Rope Dart Academy. Like, it was so awesome to have I created that game like 6 years ago, and have just been like hosting games off to the side. And then eventually I did a Renegade workshop, and then eventually I got accepted to teach it. And then I hosted the games, and it just slowly throughout the years become this thing. And so seeing that at its current apex was really awesome. The other thing that I was doing there was vending with my company, Metastatic Designs. And we had a pretty wildly successful vending event. We also sponsored the instructor gift this year. We traded about $3,000 in this thing we call a universal prop strap in exchange for like our $500 vendor fee. And because we wanted to get these things in the hands of the people that could use and appreciate things, because my philosophy as a business is essentially I don't want to sell things. I don't want to be a salesman. I just want to make people aware of the things that I offer because they're helpful and cool. And so if you're aware of it, you'll want to buy it. And if you don't, then I'm not here to sell it. So it did a lot for us to spread awareness of those things. And it also just kind of warmed our heart to see how well it was received by others. They appreciated our art, and then for them to feel empowered for what we were offering. Because one of the tags for my business is we want you to feel just as cool off stage as you do on stage. Right?
I like that.
So, yeah. So we created this universal prop strap that has a bandolier on buttons on it for juggling clubs. You can attach fans to it, poi, anything. And then it's got a long adjustable strap that you can wrap around up to 7. I think on my buddy Dan, we had 8 stabs on his back at once. And so one thing we try to do is to make custom holsters and straps so that you can live your inner ninja dreams of walking around with your sword on your back.
Yeah.
Because the festival, what do you see people with hoops? They're just carrying them like this. You see people with poi and they're wrapped around their neck, or they're just tucked into their waistband. You see people with sticks, or a dragon staff is the worst, where they're just carrying it like this. And, on stage, you look badass. You're doing the thing. The second you're walking around, it's a burden,
Yeah,
And so we were characters from Assassin's Creed, Batman, ninjas, they always just have their stuff strapped to them and it looks cool. It becomes part of their aesthetic. Like, why doesn't that exist for flow artists in real life? And so we made a lot of custom pieces for our community. We made a poi holster, which is like a drop holster and straps to your leg, and you can fold your poi tethers through it, and then there's a button snap that goes to your hip, so your poi aren't flopping around. They're instead just like stuck to your leg, or that universal prop strap I had said, or we have this like adjustable nunchuck holster. It was originally made for my nunchucks, but we made it modular and adjustable in a bunch of different places, so you can fit like vision poi, like the longer sticks in them. You can fit fans, like clack fans. I sold one once to somebody who was performing at the event I was vending at, and they were a flautist. And they saw it, and their brain immediately went, I can put my flute in that. And so we sized it to their flute, and then they could quick draw their flute and play it.
That's amazing.
And they were like, yeah, right. And they're like, how much is this? Actually, I don't care, but like, I just need to pay you. Like, how much is it? And they're like, you don't understand. I've needed a solution for this problem forever. I go to festivals, and I always got like my daughter in one hand and then my flute in my other hand. And I'm just like walking around like this the whole time, And so being able to bring a product and bring mostly like ideas and concepts, made specifically to solve the problems within our community, bring that to the community, share it with them, and then for everyone to literally have the same reaction that I did when I made the stuff of, why doesn't this already exist? Yeah, of course I'm going to buy this from you because I should already have it. This should already exist, So yeah, like from the straps and stuff like that, I also have, and I'm sorry, this is a very long-winded answer for how go. But a good friend of mine, Daniel, owns this company called Wicked Sticks. And when we met at Packfire years ago, the first thing he did was he gifted me a set of fire tonfa. And I'd never seen that before. And then I looked online. I was like, do these things exist? And he just made the pair because he thought it was a cool idea and gifted them to me. Started a lifelong friendship. And ever since then, we have collaborated on so many different prop ideas. And two of the things that we did was we set out to make the world's best palm torch, and we set out to make a new, completely different prop. And so with the world's best palm torch, it's like a leather strap palm torch, because most palms either have that pot and then like a elastic band, or it's like a wire that bends onto you all weird and stuff like that. Ours was like, a 6-inch rod that allows you to have like a big old fireball on it so it doesn't go out very shortly. And then I wrapped the bottom in leather. He wrapped the stick in silicone. And then it's like a leather strap that you can tighten. And so you can put it on your hand, your palm. You can put it on your wrist or your ankles. And so it's way more freeing and enabling because it's like sturdier. You have a bigger wick and a bigger flame, and you can attach it to different parts of your body. So, we brought a set of 10 of those, completely sold out. And then we saw we saw acrobats in the fire circle later doing acro moves with, our palms like on their ankles, like legs in the air, or people on the poles doing crazy pole dancing acrobatics with the palms strapped to their wrists or their legs and doing moves that they couldn't normally do, like on a lyra or whatever. But now they're able to make it fire, which adds, that performance and circus element. And the other thing that we made, I call them poi slingers. And if you imagine a leather armband, like just a solid one, and then on the inside, it's a industrial grade retractable key ring. That's a metal cord.
I know where you're going with
a palm torch on a... Yeah. So you can have palm torches in your hand and then flow with them, but then you can throw them out, grab the cord, and now they're poi.
That's like
and then you can stall it, let go, and it retracts directly to your palm because it's attached right here.
Oh, man.
So we put in so much work to make a system that was like easy to take off. You can take off the belt, or you can actually take off the mechanism. So that way you don't get stuck in it. Like if it retracts and then you're like, get poi locked or something, it's safe. You can take it off. Find a nice heavy duty industrial metal retractor that was heavy enough to be able to pull that weight and sturdy enough to last. And then design the palm around it that was like light enough, but heavy enough, big enough flame and all these things. But we essentially invented a new prop, brought 10 of those, sold out of those as well. And, so many of the things that we sold, we got back orders for people who are buying them online from us now that I've returned. So I've even been busy fulfilling stuff from fire drums, after fire drums. And so when it comes to like the level of watching something I brought grow with rope dart battles, fire drums was fantastic. When it went to having a new business that just started this year specifically for the purpose of our community and enabling people, it went fantastic. And then as a complete individual, I brought my partner to their first fire drums. They had a great, fantastic time. A lot of my friends from Pacific Northwest who'd never been came down to fire drums, had an amazing time. And like I was saying, it's always a family reunion. So I got to see all of my best friends from all around the country, and that it was incredibly fulfilling on an individual level. And one last fire drum story. Please. This guy named George came up to me at the beginning of fire drums, and he was like, "Hey, do you remember me?" And I looked at him and I was like, "Your face is so familiar, but you might want to help me out." And he's like, "You taught me poi 4 years ago in Thailand at your circus. Like I watched the circus show, and then at the end, I heard you announcing workshops, and then I came and took your workshops and, stayed for an extra month or however long. And we did like 2 a week. And then as soon as he said that, I was like, clicked. Yeah, absolutely. And he's like, yeah, so that became a huge part of my life. Like so much so that I'm here, and, just kind of, I guess, thanked me for, I guess, like the influence that sharing that art with him had on his life and the friends and community he met because of it. And so on Saturday night, he came up to me where I was sitting in the fire circle with all my friends, and he's like, "Can I spin poi for you?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And so he burns, and I got to like watch him and remember all the things that I had taught him and shown him, and then see him execute them perfectly, and then start adding in all these new things and like add them in together, and like just watch how his flow had evolved. And at the end, when the flames were kind of going down, I just got like so hyped and excited that like I stood up, I went out there, I gave him a big hug while we were on fire, and he did like a weave around me while I gave him a hug. But then I grabbed one of the poi and I said, "Let's do a partner weave. Like it'd be really cool to burn together real quick." And he's like, "I don't know how to do that." And I was like, "Who are you talking to? Like, we're gonna learn, bro." Yeah. And so I was like, "Put your arm out like that, and like I'm gonna scoop it, follow the figure 8, and you're gonna do this." And so it took 2 tries of like boop, okay, nope, boop, okay, no, and on the 3rd time it locked in. He got it, and it just felt so good. And we were like finishing his burn, doing like a partner weave together, full freaking circle from way back then. And my friend Amberly, who had actually came from Colorado with him, who is also another friend I hadn't seen in like 5 years, came up to me and was like, "George kept like learning partner stuff with me for the rest of the weekend. Like all the next day, all he wanted to do was like, let's do some more partner stuff. Let's do some more partner stuff. Let's do some more partner stuff." And like, it was so fulfilling to like see that like loop, like, cause you teach a bunch of people, you do a lot of things, and like, with everybody in the world, we all interact with so many people all the time, and we just don't know the influence that we have, or like, that the work we're doing matters, right? And occasionally you get these little glimpses of that kind of orbiting back around to you. And it just felt very inspiring to continue what I was doing and to, have more energy to pour into other cups for that reason, So my fire drums is probably the best my fire drums could possibly be.
Yeah, from what you told me, I don't think it could be any better. Most people, that's the experience that they want. It sounds like you got, like you said, fulfilled on so many levels, from a business perspective, from a teacher and student perspective, just from a see all your friends perspective, just across the board. That's amazing, and I'm so happy for you.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons like I try to always bring stuff. Like I said, it's my home festival. Fire drums had always, like when they first hired, like accepted me to be an instructor there and things like that, like it was definitely one of the first organizations that made me feel empowered and relevant to myself, really. Like, I got nothing to prove to other people, but like, as soon as, there's a certain amount of like approval that we do all want from other people or from our community or organizations for what we're doing, and I think Fire Drums was one of the first organizations that really helped me see the spark that I have and push into it. And all of the coordinators, all of my friends involved in the staff, all of like the organization and the community that goes there has supported me so much in everything I've done, has taught me, has helped me with personal fulfillment. Some of my best friendships and relationships have come from that environment. And so to be able to like bring things back to that community and feel like it's this beautiful symbiotic circle, is kind of what like keeps giving me faith in the world, and that we can extend that concept to the rest of it.
I think the most important thing that I've learned from the flow arts community and just being in it is the flow arts, while important, isn't actually the shining part of it. It's the community part behind it. We just all happen to be doing flow arts. And it's, like you said, the relationships that you find in there, the level of giving and love and trust and sharing of knowledge is huge. So that is awesome. I have to ask, how did you end up in Thailand running a circus?
So I had just finished doing Performers Without Borders, and I was debating whether or not I wanted to go to Thailand, right? And didn't just like one-way ticket fuck around, right? And I had a bunch of friends who, before I had left, were like, "Hey, when are you coming home? Like, what are you doing after the tour is over? Like, what are you doing?" And I had told them like, I'm probably going to go to Thailand. And they said, "What if we had a place for you to come back to?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not worried about a room, And they're like, "Well, what if us, all your best friends, moved into one house and saved you a room?" And I was like, "I'd have to come home." So at the end of Performers Without Borders, when I was originally planning to go to Thailand, I got a video call from my friends, and apparently they were in their new house. They had just signed the lease on. All of their leases had ended at a similar time, and they were in what was to be my room, drinking like a tea set that I'd left there for them. And we're like, "All right, you're coming home, right? We got you a room. We're all roommates now." And I was like, "Fuck, I gotta go." So my original plan to go to Thailand all those years ago got subverted for like a year. And I went back home because like I'm not going to say no to that. Everyone I love like came together to like, make that happen. And so a year later after that, I finally make it to Thailand, or not even Thailand, to Southeast Asia. And I was going around Southeast Asia, and as I travel, like I'm always looking for performance opportunities or like teaching opportunities and things like that. And I had been told about a community in Pai where there's a really cool flow scene. And it's a mixture of like local Thai people and expats and people who travel through every once in a while. And I was like, gotta check that out. So I go and I asked them like, "Can I run some workshops here?" And they were like, "Yeah, absolutely." And so when I got there, it was just this like fire show, like that was like, play some music every Thursday and Saturday. And for like 30, 45 minutes, people pick a song, you make a playlist, and then somebody introduces them. And then one person just goes out and burns to a song at once. And you just, how you do. So I thought instead of just teaching classes on poi and sap and all that stuff, I was like, I'm going to teach theater. Like I'm going to teach presentation. I'm going to teach how to create an act, how to interact with an audience, like all of these things. So I taught all these workshops, and a lot of the people who did those performances came, and by the end of like 2 weeks, people were like putting together acts, and like 2 weeks later, you're starting to see, the fire show, now became like, a little circus, a little bit, and fast forward another 2 weeks because I was there for about a month, and the entire show was just completely different. It was like act, and my friend Ryan, who was essentially like the MC of when it was like the fire show, really started to embrace being like a ringleader, and tying it together. So like I make this joke to performances where like you finish the performance, you're like, "All right, cool, let's go to Denny's." Like my mom gave me $10, like that's like the high that you get after performing, especially like an artistic piece that's not just I spun to fire in front of people. And so like they were all riding that high, right? And it was hosted by this place called Pai Backpackers Paradise, which is a absolutely beautiful piece of land in Pai. And it looks like a psychedelic summer camp where like a music festival, art festival is always like low key happening, And it was the perfect place to build a circus. And so Ryan, who was actually employed by them to host the fire show, because it brings people into like the bar and to the the hostel and all this stuff, offered me. He was like, people are really latching on to this idea of a circus, more than just a fire show, and people are really wanting to explore and create, and like you really helped us like do that. Like, would you like an actual permanent residency here, like free lodging, you'll get to eat, all that stuff, and like help me make this into an actual circus. And my dumb ass went, well, let me think about it. Right. So I go back home, and because I had like other things to do, and I was actually a Burning Man, and I was sitting on art structure talking to a friend, and I told them that exact story I just told you. And they said, you're in Asia living at a place actually called Paradise, and you're a circus artist, and somebody offered you the job to make a circus, and you said you had to think about it. And I realized how much of a dumbass I'd been by saying that. And I was like, oh my God, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And like, as soon as I got back from Bern, like the first thing I did was call back Ryan and be like, yeah, I'll be there. I'm buying a plane ticket as soon as I can. And you got me, let's do it. And so got there, and, making a circus isn't just let's all get together and perform, right? Like, there's so many elements that come into play that are just like logistical, right? Things like who gets to decide what acts are in the show if the show's only an hour long, right? What is the standard to which we're going to hold all of these things now? As we start monetizing it and creating ticketing systems and things like that, like how does that work? Who gets paid? How do we do all that? So it wasn't just running a circus. It started being creating a business while running a circus, while managing a community, while teaching circus skills, while performing myself.
That's a lot.
And I was wearing like all the hats, and so we had created like a staff, right? And there was like the people who had kind of like been there in the community who were like pillars, were the staff of the circus. And we slowly went from that fire show to, more and more like legitimacy, I should say, as a circus, until it was at the point where we had like wraparound bleacher like seating that was built.
Oh, wow.
There. We had like stage lights that we invested in that actually like lit up the entire stage. We had a ticketed event that had like 500 people there twice a week, and, cleared out all of the other touristy type establishments for the like 3 hours that the circus event was going on every week. Like the whole town would just show up for the circus. And it just like, it became a phenomenon. And we started like doing things like, renting out the acts that were individual acts from the circus to like a music festival somewhere else in Asia. And like, our performers would slowly like, dip in, dip out. And because we had so many people that were also temporary, we started getting performers that were like professionals from like Europe and South America and like North America, who were traveling through Asia and would hear about Medicine Circus and then make it a like priority to come. And then they would come, and then they would teach some workshops, and then they would be in the show every once in a while. And like, the whole idea of the circus became this circus of empowerment and teaching. And so, you would have somebody who watched a show 3 months ago during their like break year, right? Started taking workshops for a couple of months, and now this is their first fire performance in the circus that they originally watched 2 months ago, opening for somebody who was like a Cirque du Soleil level juggler, like who was right after them. And that same kind of culture we talk about in the flow arts, we managed to like bring and give to all of these people traveling through to our teaching circus, because the audience was just there for it. They wanted to cheer on the people who were on stage for the very first time, who might as well have been sitting next to them. Like they wanted to like see these amazing performances and performers and support, like, that's the guy that's been doing it for a decade. This is the guy who started it 3 weeks ago or whatever. And it was this beautiful and like, completely honest, like wholesome environment that went from like, a bunch of us like hippies just playing to learning how to like make a life out of it. And the scale, like just until it was like this awesome ticketed event. And, the only reason it ended, at least for me, was when COVID hit and we lost,
Sure.
tourism stops and everyone's sheltering in place and all this stuff. And so that's when I came back to America and set some roots in, decided to lean more into other things, started Metastatic Designs. And my buddy Neil is still up there holding the torch. He went back. Actually, he never left. He just lives there. Built a circus center and started a new circus called Circensia that's kind of like carrying the torch of the circus that I had helped create with my buddy Ryan so long ago.
What was your favorite moment from your circus arc?
There was a moment where so I had a friend named Astrid. She didn't always go by Astrid, and they were when I met them, their like personality was drastically different from what I see now. And I watched them grow and self-reflect and like really start to embody different parts of their personality and who they were. And I remember when they talked to me, they'd created this stage persona called Astrid. And one day they just go, "Hey, I think I want to just be Astrid now." And watch their self-development and understanding of their own character, like boom, just like was this big like light switch of like watching that person's personal development and growth, and just being able to be a part of that felt so good. And I remember there was another time where like, you know, multiple people in that same kind of a scenario who I'd like grown up with essentially over the 2 years I was there. We were at this music festival where one of our acts got hired to perform. And so I see on stage these women who were just fiery goddesses, just like passionate, fierce, confident, determined. And having known them for years and watched them get to that point, you know, like I was sitting in the crowd watching this act and I started crying, you know, because like just like being there to see that journey that all of these people were and being able to do a small part in making it happen. Like I remember I walked down to the river, then I sat on a boulder by myself and sat in the sunlight. And I was crying. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is the first time in my life by my own standard that I would call myself successful.
Whoa.
Like, I don't have all the money in the world. I don't have like, you know, all of these material things a lot of people want. But you know what I am doing is I'm completely sustaining myself and my life. I am helping other people learn how to sustain themselves in their life. And I'm doing it by spreading art and helping people figure out who they are and fulfill themselves and grow. And like, when I realized that like I was making a living doing that, like I felt successful. And I just sat on the boulder and I like happy cried for a little bit. You know, cause like it's not often, you know, you, especially with like artists, like we're all got imposter syndrome, you know, we've all got the strictest definitions of what success and perfection is to ourselves. And so to have a moment where I got to have that personal development and that was breaking through because of other people's personal development, like I think that was my happiest moment, was just because I allowed myself that happiness and that reflection, you know. And that moment has lived with me since then. I can still, it's my happy place. I go back to that boulder all the time. And when I'm doing projects like Metastatic Designs and trying to start a new business, and it's like, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. Like I'm learning to be a business person. You know, I'm learning to be a leather worker. I'm learning to bend and stuff. And oftentimes I'll go back to my rock and I'll be like, you achieved success by your own definition one time, and you can definitely do it.
I'm so glad that you got to have that experience. A lot of people, if I'm being honest, never get to that point to where they feel successful by their own definition. They're always chasing something. So I'm really happy for you that you have to get that. That's amazing. Yeah, because I know a lot, the various stereotypical, you know, measure of success is like, oh, money, material wealth, cars, big house. But for others, it's, you know, teaching and the impact on the world. For others, you know, it's even really small. Like I'm giving my dog the best life it could possibly have. That is success to me. So, you know, we each define this differently. And I'm really happy that you got that for yourself. So speaking of festivals and performances and circus, can you tell me a little bit about Neotropolis and Ninja Ex Machina?
Man, Neotropolis is like, you know, the dystopia that I would choose to live in if I had to choose a post-apocalyptic scenario to live in. Like, why can't late-stage capitalism look super neon and like, you know, Asian influenced as like the cyberpunk world, because like, you know, it might be a little easier to bear if I could just get ramen from a bar walking down the street, you know, like it's I've always been a huge fan of the cyberpunk genre, and the fact that it's like coming into its own and kind of having this new renaissance has been amazing, you know. And so my friend Laranya had gone to Neotropolis the first year that they had it, and came back and just was a complete light about it. Like, just, oh my gosh, there's this thing, you have to know about it. And so like our friends like looked at the videos of like the event and all this stuff, and we're like, yeah, we got to be there. And you know, my whole thing is like, I don't do anything half-assed. I full ass or I don't, you know. And so I was like, do you guys want to perform there? Like, we can go, but let's contribute to it, like let's be a part of that world, you know. And they were like, totally, absolutely, let's do it. So we put a group together, you know, and called it Ninja Ex Machina, and it was put together specifically for the purpose of Neotropolis. And the cool thing about Neotropolis is, sets it aside from any other festival I've been to, is first off, it's a role-playing festival. So you're only allowed into the festival grounds if you're a costume, and everyone you talk to will give you the ability to role-play with them. If you're not like into it in that moment or something like that, like you don't have to, but like, you know, instead of like getting there and someone's being like, oh, how was your trip? You could just be like, oh yeah, my van broke down, right? Or you could be like, you know, the flux capacitor on my starship blew right as I was passing the Kepler belt, and then we had to land in an asteroid. Luckily, there's a junk shop there. I was able to pull the old parts off of this T-19 and put it back in my piece. We made it here limping, but I could use a drink, you know. And then all of a sudden, you go to the bar with your friend, and you're just telling the same stories in character with all these like levels of storytelling metaphor on. So it's so much fun. And speaking of like community, the community there is fantastic, because similar to the flow arts community that gathers over a common art form, right? People who are invested in going to something like Neotropolis are doing it because they're an artist in some capacity, right? A lot of them are costume artists, and they're going because they literally make full suits of armor for movies, or like make awesome Nerf gun mods for crazy blasters, you know, and like they have a skill set that they want to share, you know. Other people are like performance artists like myself, who go there to like spin lights in the perfect setting for it. And then still other people are there because they're like fashionistas. And there's like, you know, the techwear scene at Neotropolis is huge because it's like this mecca for the aesthetic that you know, techwear is like taking off right now. And so you see all these really cool looks from all these people. And so everyone there is there to creatively contribute with themselves and connect with people who are similarly minded in that way. And there's no sense of competition, because there really isn't any competition, right? Like, no one's yucking each other's yum because, you know, they're there to play together. Like, most people go to festivals and, you know, they're doing drugs and seeing music and all that stuff. But at Neotropolis, like, you're going there to be part of the art, because you are part of the art, and you're trying to create art with people who are also artistic themselves. And it's a beautiful atmosphere. And so Ninja Ex Machina, we decided we were going to try to contribute in all these different ways. And one of my friends was volunteering in the like lore building and the game mechanics behind the festival. So while you're there, you can do games. Like, there's one of my favorite ones is there's a bounty hunting office. And if you go there, they've got these like acrylic sheets, and on the sheets you like write in like what you spend your time doing, like a dossier on yourself. Yeah. And then they take a Polaroid and they smack it on there, right? And then you get this 3D printed dongle that has a little mini game on it. And you take somebody off the bounty board and become a bounty for someone else. And so throughout the festival, there's people who are like, you know, laying low, drinking at a bar with their hood up because there's an actual bounty hunter after them. And they're just like trying to be nonchalant, sipping their drink, kind of looking around, but they're also hunting their bounty, right? So like, you know, it's everyone living their Han Solo Star Wars dream, you know. And when you find somebody, it matches the person you're looking for. You connect your 3D printed dongle to theirs, and then there's a mini game that you play. And whoever wins the mini game won the fight from when you found them. And then you either like get to turn it in and you get prizes from the bounty office, or you lose and they get a 5-minute head start where you can look for them again. And you know, tons of little things like that happening all around the festival. So all these like little mini narratives and all these little quests and adventures that all these people are on, either completely thrown by the event or their own headcanon that people are shooting for themselves, are happening all around you. So what we wanted to do was create the lore for what Ninja Ex Machina was and why we were there and what our show was. And so the lore we came up with was, there's a couple of different factions, and one of the factions is the Resistance, and then there's a couple of like corporations, which are like the corporate overlords, and then there's the Sentinels, who are like the paramilitary group, right? And they all look like kind of like Stormtrooper / RoboCop. And so our performance was a character in kind of like a Tony Starkish, like I'm showing off my Iron Man armor kind of a set situation. We had created a meeting for the Resistance, like an underground meeting, and that was at the core. And so everyone went to the core, and during the underground meeting, they unveiled Ninja Ex Machina, which was five of us the first year, people who had gone under cybernetic augmentation to become mecha ninjas, to fight against the corpos, you know? And so it was our unveiling, and that was year one, was like this exposition of like why we were there. So we had like dialogue going on. We had, you know, like as if it were a rally, you know, like a protest, you know, and then the actual show had all that context, you know, and halfway through the show, somebody got hacked and they started like glitching out, and there was combat where we had to like take down one of our own, and that was decided by the outcome of some of the games that were played earlier in the week. Like if a certain amount of this faction managed to complete this quest, then they were able to hack in and to one of our people during our performance and cause them to go rogue. So like there were elements of our performance even that were tied in to the games and the lore that people were doing during the week. And at the end of the performance, we had contacted the Sentinels, who, like I described, the paramilitary group. They came and they busted up the rally because it was a Resistance meeting. So like they came full helm armor, giant like machine gun, laser gun things, and just came through like the fascist bootlickers and just kicked us all out. Were yelling at us to like try and capture us, and like we like put on hoods and faded into the crowd, and like, you know, yeah, exactly, just like the Homer Simpson, in the shrubbery, you know.
Yep.
And they just did this whole like, you know, we keep you safe. If you want to be safe, then stop hanging around these people. You don't know what they're talking about. It's propaganda and lies. And so like it was so immersive. Like even as the crowd, you're not just going to watch a show on a stage. Like they're not just watching like even a normal circus show where it's just like, you know, really awesome things happening that has story. You know, this was a thing happening that had story that they were a part of.
Oof.
You know.
Yeah.
So it was just an extra level of immersion that you get from a place at Neotropolis, and the ability to perform there and create around that extra dimension that you wouldn't normally get at any other performance was so much fun. It was so much fun. And, you know, the inner 10-year-old in me got to be a cyber ninja. And, you know, one of the defining moments of my life, I remember, was when I put Fire Ninja on a business card when I was first like giving them out to like the performances and stuff. And I was like, I did it. I'm professional at being a ninja. Like I did it. Right. I had another one of those moments where I was like, cyber ninjas aren't a thing, right? They're not like a profession, but it is in one place in the entire world. There's one place where there are actual cyber ninjas. And in that one place, me and my friends are the actual cyber ninjas. And so I had this realizing, we were all just laughing about it, that like, if anyone on the planet could technically claim to be a cyber ninja, it's us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
just checking off the bucket list items. You were just running right through them. That's amazing. So you are now the fourth person I've interviewed from Ninja Ex Machina, and, you know, just, you know, an attendee of Neotropolis. Everything I hear about this event just sounds absolutely amazing. The level of immersion that sets it apart from every other festival, including Burning Man. It sounds really cool. I really have to go.
Well, okay, so you brought up Burning Man. I actually use that to help people understand the vibe, right? One thing I like about Burning Man is every camp brings an artistic concept and idea and a vibe, right? But when you're at a burn, whether it's the big one or a regional one, right, it kind of sounds like a dissonant chorus of 1,000 voices screaming into the void. And they're all singing beautiful songs, but they're all different and they don't all harmonize, right? Like you might go to one camp and it's all like clouds and rainbows and unicorns and Pegasus, and then the next camp you go to, it's a surly pirate telling you that they want your booty. You know, like it's just like so dissonant, right? And like it's a good time. But imagine a regional burn where every theme camp was a different part of the same thematic world, where that chorus of voices was actually singing out in harmony instead of this like chaos. And in that harmony, you're actually able to then build and develop yourself there. Like, you know, you leave burn and you come home and you get this culture shock from just having been at burn for a week. But like when I come home from Neo, I have culture shock from being a completely different human for a week. Like my name at Neo is Smooth, and it's short for Smooth Operator because I love Sade, but everyone calls me Smooth. And so, you know, I'm Smooth for a week. I come back and I'm Xander, and Xander's got bills and shit.
It's that level of immersion to me that is really what sets it apart. I just keep hearing stories from, you know, the other clan members of yours about, you know, their experiences there and how they can they've built up their own character and lore and their own backstory and how that integrates into the larger Neotropolis lore and, you know, the different random moments they experience throughout their time at Neotropolis. Just funny happenstance things that, you know, become a defining part of your experience for that year. So it's really cool.
Absolutely. It started bleeding into all of our lives too. We came back and just things that were costumed to us before the festival just become daily wear. Like, you know, we had this realization that like, you know, cyberpunk is like dystopian corporate, like, you know, end stage capitalism. Like, got it. You know, like potentially fascist government.
Got it.
Like, you know, like, and then we were like, so basically we live in a cyberpunk world without as much cool neon and outfits. Like, why don't we just bring the neon and outfits? And so it has kind of on a core identity level really started impacting us.
Yeah, we live in a boring dystopia. I would love to see it become just a little bit more spicy. So a closing tradition that we have on the show is the previous guest leaves a question for the current guest, not knowing who the current guest is. Yeah. So the question that has been left for you is, what are some unexpected places in your life that you found creativity?
Oh, that's such a good one. All right, I got to think about this for a second. So, unexpected places in my life where I found creativity. That's a good, almost loaded though, because I kind of expect to find creativity everywhere. You know, in my mind, logic and like being very analytical is a box, and creativity is a circle. You know, and you know, we use both of those things in life, but they're both everywhere, like a 1 and a 0. You know, like you can break anything down into math. Like every single thing has both a creative side and a analytical side, like the right and left hemispheres of our brains. So when you ask me like, where did I find creativity in an unusual place? It's a hard ask because I don't know where I wouldn't expect to see it, you know, especially because one of my favorite things about the human species is we are imaginative, and our adaptation is adaptation itself, and creativity is kind of manifest from adaptation. You know, we need to figure out a way to solve this problem. Creativity is uniquely solving that problem, and engineering is solving it effectively, you know? So to our very core, creativity is just a fundamental part of humanity. So I guess if an unexpected place to see creativity for me would be in nature, when I see something that I consider art, but it wasn't really made by a person for the sake of being art. It just looks artistic. You know, I would say that seeing the universe practice creativity without, you know, I mean, not to say God exists or God does not exist, or there is some sort of grand thing at play that we don't know about, not to make any claims in that direction, but to know that we manifest creativity through our thought, to see creativity in abundance in nature, whether it's at looking into the stars or just looking at a tree, and seeing evolutionary adaptations to solve problems creatively. Like, that is my favorite place to see creativity, because I can't relate to it. It manifested in a completely different way than the way that I manifest creativity, and it's awe-inspiring.
Cool. You're right. It is a little bit of a loaded question because I do see creativity everywhere. I love the Kobayashi Maru of the question, to be able to step back. I got you.
Thank you.
No, it's really good. But I also
I love that.
Fantastic. But no, you're right. Nature has a lot of really interesting things and solutions. Like, I see beauty. I love it. I see beauty in nature. Like, you look at, random shells and stuff, you see golden ratio spirals, right? Like, these things exist in nature and they came about naturally. So it's just kind of fascinating. I don't know if this is really related or not. One of the most interesting things that I've learned about nature recently is how a woodpecker's skull is shaped. What it does is its tongue is wrapped around aspects of its skull. So when it's pecking the wood, the tongue insulates the brain as shock dampeners, so it doesn't get concussions as it does that. Like, that is fascinating. I did not know that.
How does that evolve?
Accidentally? I don't know.
How do you accidentally survival your way into having a tongue like that? Like, that's insane.
Yeah, nature is just very, very strange. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've learned so much from you. Thank you for all of your stories, and I'm really glad that you've got to accomplish so much in your time so far. That's fascinating and fantastic. Before we break, where would you like to draw people's attention to, and where can people find you?
Oh, this is the place where I do the plug.
Yeah, this is the place where you do the plug.
It's sweet. I watch Hot Ones all the time, and I was just waiting for the end.
Yeah.
I was kidding. Yeah. So right now, like I said, I'm starting a new business, Metaesthetic Designs. You can find us on Instagram at Metaesthetic Designs. That's Meta, META, and then the word aesthetic, like using the A for Meta, AETH. I'm in trouble.
It'll be in the show notes.
Floundering on my own company. You get it. Metaesthetic Designs. I also have a website you can purchase from, metaestheticdesigns.com. And I'm also part of a new fire troupe up here in the Pacific Northwest called Fuego Scudo. And if you have anybody who wants to book like larger scale fire performers, you can reach me on my Instagram at Crouching Tiger Hidden Xander, or the Fuego Scudo Instagram of the same name. And yeah.
All right, fantastic.
If you have any wants for Ninja X Machina, at Ninja X Machina on Instagram as well.
From the official Cyber Ninja. Fantastic. I will put all of those links in the show notes down below. Xander, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming.
You too. Thank you so much for having me.
Cheers.